It's going.
We're recording right
Yeah, and
now?
that's now going to be the first thing on the recording, which is great.
All right, fantastic.
You can cut it.
Uh, Welcome, everybody. This is the panel, a day in the life of a PhD student. Um, Quick reminders, we had a session last week. Unfortunately, the recording wasn't able to be saved, and so we don't have access to that session. But this session is recorded, and we will post it on YouTube, and we can have access to this, and you can share it with your friends and things like that. And definitely, we want to say that we're going to have two more sessions next Friday and next Friday. That wraps up the whole event, explaining PhD and graduate school. And this session is organized in a panel. We have five PhD students, current PhD students. We will go through brief introductions one more time. We did introduce the panel last week, but we can go like very briefly and introduce the panel again. And then we have prepared a set of questions that we will ask the panel. Feel free to put questions in the chat if you want to ask, your particular questions or some of the questions we prepared. Maybe they will answer that. Maybe you have clarification questions. Feel free. Also, feel free to reach out to us offline, emails. You have access to our emails. If you don't, maybe again the PhD students here can. I think the flyer, did the flyer have the emails, guys? I don't know, probably not. But you can Google their names, find the
It
emails if you want to have a particular question to any of the panelists.
I
You
know the
can do
emails were
that,
in
or
the presentation, but in a slide that we didn't update, so I don't think we have them there now.
can someone present the screen and put the day in the life of the PhD uh, title slide just in the screen, and then maybe have a contact scslab@iit.edu. Like someone can add that. As
I'll
I
bring.
said, you can do that, Meng? Okay, so just go on the Google Drive, Day in the Life of the PhD slide deck. The first slide is the title slide, and it's pretty cute with the Chicago skyline and everything. Put that on, but just add the email under that title, like scslab@iit.edu. So everybody can feel free to email us with questions or follow-ups, or even request a one-to-one meeting if you have particular concerns about joining the PhD program and you want to talk to someone privately. Okay, with that, there you go, scslab@iit.edu. All right. So with that, I think we can start the introductions of the panel, and then we go to the questions we have for the panel. So it's one of the panelists, just one very brief introduction. Who are you? Where are you from? What's your year of the PhD? What's your area of research? And the typical introduction. We can start. Keith, you can go first.
Okay. I'm Keith Bateman. I am a third-year PhD. I'm from Illinois, and my area of research is primarily in things like provisioning and scheduling for I/O systems.
Great. Thank you. Jaime?
Okay, so I am Jaime or Jamie. I'm from Spain, an international student here. I'm a fourth year PhD student. I work on data storage, like most guys in this lab, but especially on real time I/O or data streaming. You can search for that.
Great. Thank you. Candice?
Hi, I'm Meng, and then I'm a second year PhD student from China, and my area of research is I/O characterization of HPC, high performance computing applications, and also I have some experience benchmarking different, deploying and benchmarking different storage systems. Okay.
Great. Thank you. Neeraj?
Hello, I'm Neeraj Rajesh. I'm from India. I'm a fifth year PhD student. My areas of research are I/O and on optimizing I/O using machine learning. Nice to see you all.
Thank you, Neeraj. And I know you're kind of dealing with your sick, your cold. So thank you for still joining here. We all thank you for making the time to join the panel. And then last one, Luke.
Yeah, hi, I'm Luke. I'm a third-year PhD student. My research is primarily on operating systems and the bridge between operating systems and storage systems. Okay.
Thank you. Great. Do me a small favor, Candice. Can you email all the arrays to can join us?
Yeah.
Even if they're late, it doesn't matter. Just all our arrays. Just come and join them.
Should I just send them a Zulip message? They are in
If they
the group.
have,
Yeah.
yeah, okay, do that, and also email them extra. Maybe they don't see that Zoom. Okay, great. So let's start with the questions we have. This session today is organized around last Friday we talked about how do we choose to do a PhD? What are the variables involved? How do you choose a school? How do you choose a research area? What do you do with your advisor? What's the topic of your dissertation and things like that? All the steps before you join the PhD. Today, the session is, say you join the PhD and you're starting like this August, for instance. How is that first step? What is the first steps in the PhD program and what you should be aware or, make a smart decision in the beginning of the program, preparation do you need to do? That's the topic today. So we can start with that, and I will ask each one of the panelists to give us like a short response on the question, how was the beginning of your PhD? Like what happened in the beginning of your PhD, the first semester, in a way. Panelists can choose to respond without any particular order. We do have this senior to junior level of PhDs, but I think the beginning is common across anybody. So just like whoever feels can go first and tell us a little bit about your beginning of your PhD program.
Yeah, I can start. I think that the PhD starting experience is fairly similar to most people. You enter as I don't remember, like, as a PhD student, and your first objective, right, is to reach what they call a PhD candidate. To do so, you have to cross a set of 4 exams in the form of 3 practical, like 3 theoretical exams and 1 oral exam. So most of your early steps on your PhD are dedicated to passing that barrier, right? To pass that barrier, usually like the 3 theoretical exams require you to, like, if, for example, in computer science, there are the algorithm exams, a system exams, and a language exam, which in IT can be replaced by taking
Jaime, I want to stop you because we do have questions on the core courses and qualifiers.
Okay,
I want to hear your personal opinion. What was the hurdle, the obstacles, the challenges? How did you feel? What was your main, struggle? Is it the rent? Is it going to school? Is it commuting? Is it socializing with students? Like all of that kind of part of your beginning of your PhD compared to an undergrad or a master's. And we can have more details on the core courses and qualifiers as we go along the question.
Okay. So in that direction, then, well, knowing that, like, the first year, okay, it was mostly like a significant chunk of what we were doing was I was being a TA, I was taking classes, and I was trying to start my research, right? And to start your research, the big first part is you have to read a ton of papers, right? So you start reading a ton of papers just to familiarize yourself with the domain where you might be working, right? You start very broad, and then you slowly coalesce towards a topic or something. And just going from like, well, I was an international student, so while my English was decent, going from having read like 10 papers in my life to having to read 10 papers every couple of weeks in a very complex English, and going through all of that work was very challenging. It has been it becomes very easy very fast, and then once you you finish doing that, having to start getting your brain like compressed, like develop that new part of the brain dedicated to like figuring out the research and um, acknowledging that you know a lot throughout like a year of reading papers, and that you might be able to uh, like know more than some people in your lab and propose your ideas, and like learning to share your ideas, and for people to listen to you and then to work on um, improving those ideas. I think those two areas of domain, are things that you have never done, and that once you join your PhD become like expected and really satisfying once you are able to achieve them. I don't know if that makes any sense, but
No, thank you. Yeah, of course, of course. It's all about personal experience, right? So, any other panelists wants to jump in this conversation? Candice, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, so I personally need to catch up with a lot of background, and I think having having the opportunity to join an internship and then do projects really helps me. And so I am able to meet more mentors, and they give me directions in how to read papers and how to approach certain problems in term when uh, face obs, because in research you don't there's a lot of things that are not set, that you'll have to personally explore the area to see the possibility. And then so sometimes things might I get stuck on, like I don't know how to code this, and or I don't know if there's other tools available for me to um do what I need to do. And um having more mentors really do help me see find 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 solutions. And then that also builds up my confidence in continuing all the projects that I'm doing.
Yeah, well, that's a good answer. Like this whole mentorship and engagement in projects and meeting
Yeah.
more people and understanding their perspective and bringing that into your mindset. That's a great response, Candice. That makes more sense. Yes. Okay, Luke, any thoughts?
So for me, the beginning of my PhD was partially entangled with a project I had started in my master's. Uh, I was My PhD essentially started off similarly to Jaime's. I was reading a bunch of papers. I was trying to catch up with things, trying to identify a specific topic that I was going to publish on. Most of my initial PhD was focused on just trying to identify a problem in the sea of literature that I had to wade through. But eventually I got through it all, and I was able to find a topic and publish on it. So it was mainly just a lot of effort to catch up on material. And that's kind of the point. A PhD is about learning. So yeah, that's essentially how my
Yeah,
early time was.
I see. Okay, Keith.
I think I had a bit of a mixed experience where I was working on some things that I had been doing more in my already in my undergrad before. Um, like I'm looking back, and there were some early publications from earlier in my from the beginning of my PhD. We were doing like HCL and Chronolog, so it was still projects that I was just involved in, and I wasn't really managing. But then when the summer came around, I did end up getting involved in an internship, so that's more like kind of like Candace's experience, and that internship did has led to my first major project, where I got to manage it myself afterwards, which is the Luxio project, which I've been managing pretty much ever since. But yeah, it it's definitely important to have that communication with other people, because like Luke was saying, it was difficult for him because he had to look through all this different stuff. But if you're if you're able to sort of find someone who has a problem that they need solved, that's great. And that definitely helped me for sure. Yeah.
I see. Let's go to Neeraj, who has maybe a little more unique story of kind of changing subjects in his PhD and starting in one area and progressing to an evolution of that area to some domain specific focus. So maybe Neeraj has a little different story of his beginnings of his PhD.
Yeah, so I started doing my PhD with one professor, and I was working on mainly like machine learning and natural language processing, and more in that domain. And I don't know how much I blacked out in my head because I just don't like exams, and you have three qualifiers that you have to get an A in, which didn't really care for. So but after I think I took my advanced operating systems class in my third semester, and I enjoyed and I didn't know how much I enjoyed like doing system stuff as well on top of machine learning, because until then it was just more like a hobby. I was like, oh yeah, this is also fun. Spoke to Anthony, and then I transferred. I joined the lab, and like that's when.
What was the beginning? What was the beginning of that like situation? Like, did you feel like you had a gap in knowledge? Did you have to catch up with the gaps?
Once
was it stressful?
Once I joined was when I realized how what I really got myself into, because yes, application of machine learning to optimize things in clusters and systems and HPC is super interesting and fun, but you gotta start somewhere, and that was a lot of information that I did not have. Like I had to gain that by reading a lot of papers, and that was interesting but also stressful, and it just takes a bit of time, and you will have a lot of gaps in your knowledge, but you also know that since you are applying ML optimizations in HPC, you also have the people that you're working with have gaps in their knowledge, and you have to be able to like learn to speak up and say, no, that's not how that works. And sometimes when you're telling that to your research advisor, it's a little intimidating. You got to learn to like be confident in what you know and stick up for yourself. That was an experience.
Yeah, that's a great question. Great response. I will give you guys a summary of all of that from the panel and give you a little bit my experience and debunk some of the myths. For some people that just joined or they don't know what we're talking about, the question here is, how is the beginning of a PhD? Like, what is that? What is the life you live when you start a PhD program? I would start by saying the beginning of the PhD program is the road to become a subject matter expert. So there is a path between you being a general student, like all of the students in master programs are pretty equal in a sense of you all have the same curriculum, you all have the same homeworks and assignments, and theoretically at the end of your projects, of your programs, you all graduate with a similar set of skills. When you join a PhD though, there is this beginning period where you know nothing on this domain or this specific focus area you're doing your research on, and you're not an expert yet, which means there is this path for you to become from a typical student of a university to become a global subject matter expert. That subject matter, of course, it could be a tiny little thing. You can be a perfect computer scientist in scheduling algorithms or data structure algorithms or whatever other things you may be focusing on. And it could be a small subject, it could be a big subject. So you have to think of yourself, even if you were playing a video game, even if you were playing basketball or you were doing any other activity, there is a path, there is a road between you being an average basketball player and you being an NBA player, right? Like those NBA players are just few 200 people in the world that they play basketball at that top extreme level. And for them to reach that status, it took them work. It took them foundations. like build the foundations, like study this. The panel told us, oh, I was studying papers. I was trying to bridge the gaps I had in knowledge before I can start contributing in that area. So this beginning period is mostly knowledge extraction that's performed by literature review. You're just reading a few papers. You're participating in meetings and projects with other senior people, either professors or senior PhDs or postdocs or computer scientists from labs, whoever is the one that you're collaborating with. And so your knowledge extraction, that stage where you're just extracting knowledge and you're trying to learn everything you can to learn in that area that you want to work on. Besides that, or part of this activity is also you attending some classes. No one mentioned the classes here from the panel, but the very beginning of a PhD will include some classes, and those classes are organized in different categories. There are core groups of classes that all the PhDs have to take. And why do we do that as a school? We want all the PhDs to have a baseline expertise and knowledge and capability, skill. And then on top of that, you can do specialized classes. Like each PhD student can choose whatever he or she wants to register. Besides the core classes, there's no other requirement. You can go attend any class in the university, offered in the university. It can be even interdisciplinary. If you found some cool chemistry class that has computational chemistry, and your research is how do I do computer science to allow chemists to do something cool, you may want to go attend a class in chemistry just to become a little more knowledgeable in that domain of chemistry and what are the requirements for these people to have a computer science technology to leverage, to use, to better do science. So there's a lot of flexibility in the core stuff, in the classwork stuff. And then as the panel said, of course, you're just reading it from your own, Googling things online, documentations of software tools you're using, papers that talk about a specific topic. And that's pretty much the beginning steps where really you're still a student. That's why we call them PhD students in the beginning of the projects, of their careers. Let's switch now the question. Oh, and the debugging I wanted to do is, one more time, maybe the panel knew or maybe they didn't. I come from the military, and so I want to make sure that you guys don't feel intimidated or threatened or whatever when you hear the words PhD and dissertations and all of that. I had no idea about high performance computing. The first time in my life I heard the word high performance computing was the day I interviewed for the program, for the PhD program. So sure, the beginning of it was pretty stressful because here I was trying to enter a new space, having no background, having to catch up, and having to compete in a way with other scientists in the field that they had years and years of exposure to these concepts. But I did, and not me only, anybody can do it. Like, it's not about me necessarily. We have a question, we will come to you, Feijing. So I want to make sure that you understand that you can join a program, even if you are a physicist major and then you have a PhD in computer science, you can do it. The program itself allows any candidate, any student in the program to blossom, to learn, to extract knowledge and be methodical and then contribute to that domain, even if your background is totally different. And that's a capability of the program and the flexibility of academia. It's not necessarily the same with an undergrad or master, because there it's more like a guided knowledge through coursework and through lectures and through homeworks. PhD is more like a free-flowing knowledge extraction. There's no specific direction. You don't have to deliver a specific homework. You just have to become an expert in that field. Let's go to the next question, which it may be connected to the question from Feijing. What about core courses, and what are these qualifiers, and how do you complete them? And the question from the audience was, how many courses a PhD student are required to to take at the early stage, or maybe that depends on the background of the specific student? That's a fantastic question. I think all of this is documented very well on the PhD handbook of every university. Most likely universities have some sort of a page that says about the PhD program, and they do list these requirements, like, okay, here's the classes you have to attend. If you are a master's student with computer science background, here's a different list of classes. If your master is in a different domain, like a computation, or here's the bulletin. Yes, program requirements. So I strongly recommend each of you check these requirements. But I will give you one more time. The simplistic answer is there are these paths of coursework that depends on your background, and it is pretty flexible, except the core courses. And to kind of give quickly the answer on the core courses, in our school, which could be changing across different schools, but roughly it's pretty much the same, we have three main areas of focus: languages, systems, and algorithms. Okay, these three domains are the core groups you have to attend a class and take a written exam as a qualifier. At the end of your 2 years, the first 2 years, you need to pass your qualifier exams. Your qualifier exams is a simple exam, a written exam, that checks your knowledge on these three core groups of classes. Languages, kind of like, think of it like, theory of computation, formal expressions, things like that. Then we go to systems. Think of like operating systems and schedulers and firmware and drivers and file systems and all of this stuff. And then you go to algorithms, that just really talks about how do you devise an algorithm? How do you prove an algorithm? What's the complexity of the algorithm? Things like that. So these are the core groups. And within the 2 years, you have to attend classes and take written exams. As a special case in IIT, and that's only in IIT, I can't speak for all the universities of the world. Maybe other ones have similar exceptions or rules. The IIT Council, Academic Council, decided that having written exams is really kind of not fair. Some students are really good at giving exams. Some students that have brilliant minds really don't perform well in exams, right? Like we all know that. You may have had this experience yourself in previous exams in your life, right? Where you're like, I know these things in mathematics or algebra or whatever, but if you put me in a 2-hour contest to put down all my thoughts, I'm not good at that and I'm gonna fail at that. So recognizing that exams are kind of like a construct of the past, IIT implemented this new strategy where you're registering to these core groups and you tag yourself with under a special section of registration that's called the PhD section. So you're attending a normal class like CS 550, for instance. You're just attending the class, you have your operating systems class, you go to your class, you do anything that any other master student does. However, because you're a PhD and you want to qualify for your PhD, the professor might give you a little extra work, maybe a little extra homework or a little paper to read and present a paper or some extra something. And if you achieve a high ranking, like a score, like A or the top of the class, then you qualify and you skip your written exams. You don't have to give an additional written exam on that core group knowledge. And you pass the qualifier automatically, which is great. So now our PhDs are focusing really on taking the classes, these three core classes, and making sure they get an A, which means you just really study on the core. And that's the qualification in the core group. That's that you have to understand. Each program in any university will have a core group. And they will have qualifier exams. How they perform the exams may be different from school to school, but the logic is the same. Anything that the panel wants to say here? So before I move to the next kind of question, which has to do with work and arrays, TAs, internships, and things like that.
Yeah.
Anything that maybe I missed?
I think the way that it's usually presented in the PhD section of these courses is either it'll be some sort of special project or like an exam. So I think for me, I the ones that I remember I had a languages exam, I think, which was a situation where you have to get a certain grade on this particular examination in order to get the PhD qualification for that course. And then in the other one was, let's see, distributed systems, languages, and algorithms. In the algorithms course, I was asked to do like a uh, paper kind of study. So I was given a paper, and this wasn't a part of like the master's part of the course, but I was given a paper and I had to talk about that paper and give a presentation on it to the professor. So that's sort of some of the things you might expect. Obviously, it depends on the course, but that was what it was for me.
Great, yes, great feedback. And we do have some questions on the chat, so I'll go first to the questions. Can PhD students pursue dual degree studies in the early years to make up the knowledge gap? We were talking about earlier the beginning and the knowledge gap. For example, my master's programs is MCS without a specialization. I want to learn more about applied mathematics or applied statistics. Could I try to get a data science related master's degree in the PhD program? Great question. The answer is yes. Like through that structure, when I told you, besides the core group that every PhD student has to attend to go and do the class and potentially do the qualifier on top of the class, then you have freedom to register whatever you want to register on. So if you think, oh, I need to kind of have 4 extra classes for me to focus on data science or applied statistics, you can do that. And there's no limitation to how many classes you want to register on. Of course, at some point you want to stop registering for classes and actually do research. So you don't anticipate to have 5 years of PhD continuing taking classes and classes and classes. I mean, obviously, but in the first 2 years, absolutely you can. Like you simply just talk to your advisor. Typically how it usually goes is your advisor will be covering a lot of these tuitions and your stipends and stuff like that. So, you know, if you're saying, hey, my research direction is going to that kind of applied statistics through computational empowerment, or I want to use parallel computing to do even better statistics, and whatever you think you're going towards, absolutely you can go and register to kind of more classes and kind of get. Is there an official assignment of dual degree? No, there is no dual degree in PhDs in a sense. Like the PhD title at the end of your graduation, it will say a doctorate in computer science. It wouldn't even say your specialization. Like my PhD was HPC and IO and all of that kind of stuff. It doesn't say anywhere that I was an HPC IO PhD person. Like it just says doctorate in computer science. Right? So really, your official assignment or designation of what you are, or what, it's just a PhD, right? Like it's just a general computer science PhD. There are certain cases where you could have dual advisors, which could be or also dual institutions. You could be working, for instance, let's say, with a medical clinic. And this medical clinic, they're doing a lot of biology and collection of samples and blah, 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 blah. And then you're saying, well, I have gaps of processing all this medical data and I need more computer science of this. And then suddenly you work together with the medical or biology department and the computer design department. And these are special cases, of course, and interdisciplinary dual degrees and PhDs, not dual degrees, but dual advisors on your PhD. It's kind of like rare. Let's say 1 in 200 PhD students, like a very small percentage, will have like a specific dual advisor situation. It is possible. Again, if you really think you fall under that category, you can talk to your academic advisor. Maybe he has friends in other departments, other faculty members, and they say, well, maybe we can work together with that department and we cannot co-advise you, and you get the expertise from 2 faculty members, and then you become an interdisciplinary expert in a way, right? So yes, you can through the courses, and potentially through advising from multiple departments or things like that. There are people that actually do even across institutions, which is very rare. Actually, there is like 1 in 2,000 PhDs may do cross-institutional co-advising, blah, 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 blah. So I hope I answered your question about your gap and if I can do dual or I can mix and match knowledge from different areas. So I hope I did answer that question. Your next question is a little outside of this gap knowledge in the beginning and the core courses, so I'll keep it for later. It's a great question for the programming, but we can talk about it a little later. So I want to ask the panel now, if we don't have any other questions, what do you do for work and why do you need to do it in a sense of like arrays, TAs, internships? Any of the panelists that want to explain a little bit?
People,
I guess
some
simplified question, Jaime, would be, can you guys talk to us a little bit about separating your academic workload versus your kind of workload, like when you consider an employee of the university, and what does that look like? Like, what are the requirements? Like, do you have to go report to a boss? Do you have a punch card that says I worked 9 to 5?
No.
Like, how does this look like in terms of employment? Because each PhD would probably be an employee of the university. That's another big theme. I want you guys to separate your brains from your academic programs. All undergrads and masters, or you're just simply a student, that each PhD in the department is also considered a colleague. It's considered an employee of the department. They're getting paid to perform a duty. And you can think of a PhD program like a hybrid between work and study. So let's talk a little bit about that. What's your experience, guys, the panel, on that kind of level of I'm working, but I'm also studying, but I'm also researching. So like, how is that all of that balance between working and studying?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I do think that some of the other PhD students can probably provide a much complex one. Personally, I just have a bunch of different things, but all within the context of the university. At this point, some of the people here do have internships and stuff like that. But for example, currently, what do I do? So I work on my own research. I work on the research I'm a co-author in another paper with one of the PhD students on the lab. I have like 4 groups as part of my RA of the university. I manage the research of 4 master students that they are doing different, either their master thesis or they are doing research for the class of my advisor, etc. And then on top of that, I'm also on, as part of my RA ship towards the lab. I also help in one of our more mature projects that are currently being developed, right? Because and as an engineering product, right? Because you do your research, you present your paper, and then hopefully you get money to develop that system fully, right? So I have 2 papers, one for me, one for another PhD student, 4 different master level students, and then an external project, like a project from the lab that is being developed as a full product for the community, right? And part of that, one of those is for my, like, the papers are for research, for my own research, and to extend my research as part of my PhD, and the others are part of the fact that I get paid as an RA. And what I usually do is compartmentalize a lot of that in days. So Friday is my student day, right? So I'm here meeting with you guys. Later on, I have meetings with a lot of my students. Tuesday is my other paper day. Thursday is usually the day that I work for this external project, and then Monday and Wednesday tends to be the day that I work on my own paper, right? And usually, if you compartmentalize the different days, for me it works really much better, because you are able to clear your mind of, like, I'm working on this, instead of swapping between different projects every couple of hours, which does terrible thing to the mind. And And yeah, and then
Thank you.
that's it, I think.
We have 50 minutes, so I want to jump to other panelists. And I also want to mention that we didn't tell the audience that, as I said earlier, the employment comes in different forms. You will never see a PhD student in IIT, for instance, or maybe I shouldn't say never, but most likely computer science department, just being employed as graduate student worker, like say library front desk, right? Like that's a form of employment. A lot of students in master level or undergrad, they get jobs with the university. Someone is manning the front desk at the computer science department. Someone is manning the MTCC, some sort of services or whatever. These are jobs that are in addition to your academic workload. In PhD level, we try to give jobs to students that have more connection to their actual academic work, right? Like a form of that is either a research assistantship or a teaching assistantship. Both of them are related to your PhD level, right? Like you either become a professor down the line, so you need experience teaching, and teaching assistantships can have work, like you give assignments, you grade assignments, you proctor exams, you have office hours for students to come and take advice from you, but it doesn't really help your personal research necessarily, right? Like it's connected to your PhD level or career, but is not connected to your actual dissertation work. Another form of employment is research assistantships. That's really more connected to PhD level work, because now you're just paid to assist in research. And these research are specific projects that the faculty member, your advisor is running, and it gives some of this money to the students to kind of perform research on the project. So that's the form of employment. As a form of external employment are internships, where you kind of leave the university, you go for 3 months to this intern program, and you come back to the university when the program ends. So those are the typical 3 forms of employment for a PhD student. Okay, so given that, now back to
is that internships will usually be during the summer, whereas RAs and TAs will usually be during the semester.
Fantastic correction. Yes.
Yeah.
And one question: can someone be both a TA and RA and have double the income? No. Typically, these are like exclusive. Like either you have an RA or a TA, right? Can someone be an intern and still be at the university and be RA? No. Internships programs interrupt the academic project program, and they use kind of like pause it. You go for internship and you come back.
However, if you want to make more money, you can TA for multiple classes at the same time. That's something that is allowed, but it can be annoying because if you have to do that and keep up with your research, it can get really difficult.
Correct, yeah. And it's also subject matter to the department. They will give you a multiple assignment.
Considerations.
Also, another kind of cool thing that Niraj put into the chat was special rules may apply for international people, meaning that you need to maintain an international status. And that status typically is consisting of 6 credit hours of classes plus array. If you have 6 credit hours per semester and an array, you are considered a full-time international student. So you're not violating your visa, your F1 visa. You can have 3 hours of classes, for instance, and be busy with your array. You have to have 6 hours of classes and your array. And then your array is typically organized for 20 hours per week, similar for the TA. You can expect to work a full 40 hours as an employee, and then on top of that, do your research and do your classes, right? So we're talking about these are all
illegal. It's illegal to have more than 20 hours if you're an F1 student.
Exactly. It's illegal. You're violating your status. So these are what we're talking about employment. This is part-time employment in a way. Like think of it this way. Okay. So any other thoughts from the panel? Because it's 11:49.
Yes. When you say classes, he says like, oh, the ARA and 6 credit of classes. One of the classes is PhD research, right? There is a class called CS 691, which is like, I'm going to go, like it has a name, but it's basically, I'm going to do my research, my PhD research, right? So you take 6 credits of PhD research and you do 20 hours of RA, right?
Yeah,
Or
yeah,
as Nita says, you get an internship with like a national lab or a company or something, and then they pay you, and then you don't have to be an RA, and then you do like 40 hours of internship with them while doing your research with them, right? When you do an internship with a lab or a company, it's in the hopes that you're doing some research for them, and then you're gonna get to publish it as you advance your PhD, and so you can work for them full time.
yep. That's a great comment. I also want to add to you guys pitfalls or problems with this kind of work study kind of situation, right? In the back in the back of your minds as PhD students, it's to your benefit to choose employment opportunities based on your research activity, right? So there are situations where in the past PhD students decided to leave and go for an internship, and the internship was like in a typical computer science company like a Google or a Facebook or a whatever kind of style like that. And really, they stayed away from the research, and they came back from the internship, and they're not smarter or they're not more knowledgeable in their research. They did some other stuff. They did enhance their network, the professional network. They made some money in the internship, but it's to the benefit of the student to go work on an intern or an array that's relatively connected to what you're doing, right? Like you could be having an array in biology. There's no limit there. You could be working on your dissertation as a computer science scheduler, like scheduling person, algorithms and stuff like that. And you can have an array on a project with the food science and nutrition department, and you're working on data analytics. But do you really want to accept an array like that? Then you'll be working half your time on something irrelevant from your dissertation. So a typical guideline is let's be smart and choose employment opportunities, because there are many in computer science, like projects and labs and all kinds of stuff that they could be connected to your research. So you can use that time you spent either arraying or intern to put like a chapter of your dissertation. The work you performed during your internship, it would be great if you use it to your dissertation. So those are the things that you should be aware of. Yes, we will post them on YouTube. A quick question: can we have access to that recorded video? I want to send you some other stuff. Okay, that's another thing. Yes, we're recording this video and we will upload it to YouTube for the SCS lab, and we will advertise the links for these sessions for anybody to watch them again. I think we can move on the work, and kind of I think this is a better panel question. How do you guys personally balance your academic workload, courses and learning and studying, and with your employment kind of work where you just do arrays and coding, or you attending meetings, or you're doing internships, and with your personal life? Like this sounds like a lot, like you have to also, it can be intimidating. So let's ask the panel, how do you guys balance this? Like, how do you achieve a good balance between work and study and life? Anybody can jump in, whoever wants to say some.
I'll go again. I explained my approach of like compartmentalizing days, and I think that it further extends to the PhD, right? To the personal life. I will be honest and say that there are periods on the life of a PhD student where you work more than your 40 hours on your own research, right? Like I really want to work on my research, and sometimes I work on it on the weekends. And so sometimes it's hard to blur those situations, or you might be fighting back on one of your code bases, and you're like, I really want to finish this, and you extend your hours to like 8 in the afternoon. But usually it's all about establishing deadlines. If you like establishing mental deadlines, right? If you set up to work at like 8 or 9 in the morning, and you're like, I'm gonna be finished by 6, and then at 6 you are free. You can go to the gym, you can go meet some friends or watch a movie. And same thing with the weekends. I'm happy to, like, if I sit down to work on a Saturday, I'll go like, okay, I'm gonna work today and like this morning, and then after lunch I'll go and do some plans with my friends. Just understand the compartmentalization of like, you cannot be just doing your PhD all the time. and understanding that I'm going to finish at 7 and do some fun things, or I'm going to take this morning for this, and then the rest of the weekend I'll take it for myself or something like that, right? Compartmentalize both of them. And enjoy doing things that are not your PhD, and don't be thinking about your PhD. This is an issue I committed for my first 2 years, where even when I was not doing my PhD, I was thinking about my PhD. And then at some point you go like, I'm going nuts. So you just have to stop thinking about it, just enjoy your time, and then come back with fresh mind, new ideas, and it works much better for your mental health.
Yeah, I will add something we say a lot here is that PhD is deadline oriented, because we will have conferences with strict deadlines that we need to meet for our papers. And so something, I mean, I know I work a lot with Niraj over there, and yeah, I'm sure he can attest that when we have a deadline coming in a conference, we are like in a call all day working on that paper, breaks only to eat and sleep. But then when the conference is over and we've submitted to the conference, we really have nothing to do after that. So we go, you know, do whatever. We play video games or go out with our girlfriends or whatever. It's life.
We catch up on sleep.
Sleep, yes. Oh my gosh, yes. We sleep more than anything when it's over. But yeah, when we have to submit, we're there 100%. Like, you have to be doing everything you have to be doing to get that submission, and everything else gets put on the back burner. And then once you've submitted, you're done for now. And then the next thing comes along.
Great response. I like it. You introducing this deadline-oriented work style. Any other panelist wants to add something on this balance of life, study, work? Open. The floor is open, please.
Get a hobby.
Yeah, I find doing exercise really help relieving stress, and I'm still exploring what's the best way. Like, for example, the first year I plan my exercise, do a little bit every day, and then so I not only work during the week, but I also have some time to work during the weekend. And for this year, I start to focus all my exercise time during the weekend, and then all my work time during the week. So then I would rarely work during the weekend, but I would put a lot of time during the week to work on the research. So trying different ways to see which way works the best for me.
That's great feedback. Luke, do you have any feedback there? Or should I move to the next question? We only have 2 minutes left.
Well, with 2 minutes left, you should probably go to the next one.
Okay, I will wrap up this balanced life that obviously it is very subjective. I think you all understand that any environment of work, or you wanting to become an expert, like let's say you want to learn play chess in an expert level, yes, any commitment like that will introduce a lot of activity, a lot of dedication, a lot of devotion, and self-motivation, and you want to do it. Like, this is not like a class again that it just tells you deliver the homework Monday morning. Therefore, it's a little bit of a commitment in a way, and it does have a lot of work, and it will influence your life, especially when it's well defined. It's this 5 years of study. You understand you're joining that. People can still have families. We have students that are married and they have kids. People are single. I think it crosses the barriers between males and females, or international, American, single, married. All of this spectrum exists in the PhD program. And if people do that, they probably figured out a way to do a PhD and a wedding or marriage or something, right? Like, so it is doable. It is doable. And then everybody can figure out their own balance. The suggestion I have to any person that joins or walks through that is the key word that Keith mentioned, deadline oriented. Like, there are peaks and valleys in PhD programs. In my life, work was more steady before I joined the PhD back in the day. But when I joined the PhD, I actually had the busiest periods of my life, but also the most relaxed one. It could be Monday morning and I could be playing video games. because I just submitted my paper and nobody bothered me, or I didn't have anything else to do. So you kind of get that freedom to kind of have a lot of work in certain periods and then not a lot of work in other periods. That's the beauty of academics, right? I want to touch the question of the panel of the audience first, and then wrap up with the last question I have to the panel. How important are programming skills for PhD students in computer science? What programming language do you use regularly in your research, and how would you recommend we have a solid foundation in certain programming languages? I will not take it to the panel right now. I will quickly say programming languages are pretty irrelevant if you just want a name of a programming language, because it is subject to your area, right? Like if you're doing a lot of machine learning, obviously you're probably using a lot of Python and this kind of stuff. If you're doing systems, you're most likely doing C and C++ and like lower level languages, and so on and so forth. So the language itself is probably a little irrelevant, but the level of programming, I would say, yes, you need to be a programmer. You need to know how computers works, and you need to be able to program a complex logic. So if you have gaps in programming, you definitely need to catch up with it, and that's part of the knowledge gap. Like in the first few years, you can just code a few things, and you can expose yourself to new languages, and there's no deadline for that. Like you could be working on a project the first year, and then next year you join another project, and that other project is in Python. So now you like suddenly you're switching languages and stuff. Is it mandatory to code? Yes, most likely in computer science papers and dissertations, and yes, you would probably have to develop something new. Now, is that level of programming to the level of being hired at a senior engineer level at Google? No, you shouldn't consider yourself like this expert programmer or developer kind of style. Your job is more to materialize a proof of concept idea that you had and prove that it works. And so therefore proof of concept and prototype code doesn't necessarily follow typical software engineering life cycles and diagrams and UMLs and production ready code, right? Like most of the time it's academic code. You just want to make sure that you code it, you test it, and that's it, right? Like some of the projects, they may be more product oriented, as Jaime mentioned earlier. Some of the projects are researchy projects that aim to develop new tools that other scientists can use. For this special kind of project where there is software development involved, yes, you might need to, if you are a good programmer, aim to join those kind of projects. If you're not, you can stay away from those programming heavy projects and you stay on the conceptual ideas and algorithms projects. Right? So it's really depending on that. Would I make programming a showstopper? Like if I don't know, I can't do PhD? No, I think you can still do PhD and not being an expert programmer. But you definitely need programming. I hope that I'm answering the question.
You should be able to use math and hop on the theory side of things.
We have another question. What are the main differences between PhD qualification exams and the graduate class exams? It's a little different because a qualification written exam is trying to test you on the overall concepts of the domain, not only on the textbook material, meaning that your qualification exam is a little more wide as a concept. In practice, though, remember when I said in IIT, most of these qualification exams are connected to the class. So really, you're going to do the normal graduate class exam and this extra little project for the PhD level, and you're done. So, but if you go to write the exams in the written form, they're separate organization from the class. They're going to be separate dates. Only the PhD students will go into that room and give the written exams. So, and the questions they may ask you may go a little outside of the textbook. to just check you that you're really good at that domain. Let's say it's algorithms, it will just definitely there. But again, we started a little later, so we're good to go for the 60-minute. I think the last questions we had on the preparation of this is like, how do you choose research project? What exactly is research, and how do you do it? That's a pretty generic question, and I think people will, if you Google or now we're going to ask the panel, each one of these people will give us slightly different answer. I will probably direct you to the general scientific method. That's what research is. There's a specific scientific method from ancient world, right? Like you do observations, you do hypotheses, you do testing of the hypotheses, and then you do analysis of the results to kind of conclude that if the hypotheses were true or not. Those are the steps in the scientific method. So research is really pretty much the same, but I will give quickly another answer to that. Things in science are very well structured, meaning that you're not requested to kind of reinvent everything how we do research, right? Like things are pretty straightforward. You have a topic, the ideas, the scientific ideas are communicated through the means of a scientific paper. The scientific paper gets organized and published either in conferences, in proceedings of conferences, or in scientific journals. Those specific conferences and journals at the same time, they post guidelines. This is how you organize a scientific paper. And most scientific papers have the same template. There are 5 sections: introduction, background, approach, experimental results, conclusion, right? Like most of these things are very templated. Like you're not working on a free roaming space. Like you pretty much putting together your thoughts, your ideas, your implementation in a very structured way. So that's what research is about, is performing an innovative, novel idea, proof of concept of it, and putting it in a way that you can communicate the results of that. And the communication of the results is happening through these publications. So it's very straightforward. I don't think it's very confusing there. Even if you've never done it, the first time you're joining a PhD program, you most likely will work with a senior PhD, and you're most likely you're going to co-author a paper, and you'll see the activity. Now, these papers do definitely have a technical language, which is a challenge for international students, I think. But even for American students, it doesn't matter if you're a native speaker. It's about this kind of technical language or the way we present those ideas. So that's a little bit tricky, and we can expand more next week. Before we wrap up, next week we will be discussing the topics of how to write these papers, how to select the conference to publish to, how do I create the thesis, what's a good paper, what's a medium paper, how do I get distinguished in these areas? Are there any awards I can win as the best paper and as the best researchers? And so the next session will focus a little bit on how do we perform research, and this last question kind of connects to that. So I hope that is helping you, see the sessions and for us to join. So please make sure that you advertise to your friends. Again, next Friday we will have another session for that, and I thank you all for attending. Thanks the panelists for taking the time of their busy day to join and give their opinions. I do want the panel. We can stop recording here, Keith.